I would love to know just even how you got to this point, because I've been following along for a
Yeah,
long time, and
yeah.
it's I know that there's so much more to it than just like making really rad videos and posting them on the internet.
Mhm.
There's thought that goes behind all this stuff, and there's obviously partnerships that come with that. And I guess, like, is there a point at which you kind of crossed over a threshold of, okay,
Mm.
I'm making content, but now I know that there's value and I know I should be doing something with it?
Yeah, there was a point. I live in Bentonville, and well, Bella Vista, technically north of Bentonville, and we moved here from Idaho, and we came here because we knew there was a lot of mountain biking. We also, the cost of living at that time was still pretty affordable. And I just wanted to take some time off of work, which what I did in the past was, I went to school for graphic design and I worked for a lot of tech companies, doing like user interface, like web design stuff. And so I was just tired of staring at a screen all day, to be honest. So I think getting to Bentonville, I wanted to take some time off from doing that and kind of got back into mountain bike coaching. I think I also just gave myself the time and space to explore something else. Um, and I think our living arrangements, just like I said, cost of living in Bentonville being a lot lower. And so we didn't have the stress, the financial stress if I have to work. And so I think it was kind of like a perfect storm, if that makes sense, of
Mm.
kind of putting myself in luck's way in a little in some ways, but that I was at the right place at the right time. And I just started I was like, well, what if I make some funny videos and put them on Instagram? I knew that this is 2.5 years ago. And I started doing that, and people thought it was funny. So, as you know, my content leans into sort of like the humorous, relatable things we all face as someone in mountain biking. And yeah, I think the point in time that I realized, whoa, maybe this could be more than just like I post a funny thing and people like it. Could this be a job? Could this be a job, a career? Um, and it's when I think a few brands started reaching out, and I was like, "Whoa, that's weird." Oh, you want to send me some free things? And I think you start to first it's like the free stuff, and you're like, "Yeah, I'll take some free stuff," and then people would start to ask like, "Well, what are your rates?" And then I kind of pause and say, let me get back to you on that. I didn't know, but coming from the design world certainly helped, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that, just like structuring that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the point in time was probably 6 months in after I
Wow.
started,
Mhm.
and I was like, okay, like this could be something. And I really enjoyed meeting people. I think being here in Bentonville was good because there are a lot of people that mountain bike or come visit, and people would recognize me and be like, I love your videos. That one video. And I just think that opening conversation with people was just awesome. Like I think I think I knew I was onto something when even like my best friends were reaching out to me, and they had said, this is you. This is 100% you. And you're doing it. And so I think that was a good sign for me of this is like something I really want to pursue and do. It felt good. Felt right.
That's it, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
authentic, it's relatable, it's 100% on point, and it doesn't feel like you're, necessarily pushing to do anything. And I think
Hmm.
that a lot of brands are actually looking for more of the accessible side of things. Like, when you have this
Hmm.
athlete that's only doing top tier performances, but isn't actually speaking to the camera, isn't actually connecting with the audience,
Hmm.
they're just putting something out there for the audience to essentially consume and move on. Whereas you're
Yeah.
actually like out there, just the accessibility of it, and just making it easy for brands and people to connect together through your content, I think makes a huge difference in the ability
For
and,
sure.
interest of people to kind of come out of the woodwork and start to make those
Yeah.
questions. That's interesting. So
Yeah.
so you start out, I mean, I feel like everybody goes through a similar phase, right? Like, you start
Hmm.
getting those like, oh, we'd like to work together. And then you realize like, oh
Hmm.
wait, they're reaching out because there's value here,
Yes.
and you have to start somewhere when it comes to
Hmm.
the actual, like, what is the rate for this thing. And in
Yes.
the absence of having existing sponsors, like some, a lot of pro riders are just now figuring out, content side of things. So they have at least a
Hmm.
running start on some of this stuff. But starting from basically just this is your first step,
Hmm.
how did you develop that first phase of your pricing structure? I mean, was it just
Yeah.
t- test and learn, or how did it
It
go?
was, yeah, it was test and learn. Because I didn't know anybody else really doing it, and I mean, I talk a lot with Sebastian or Seabass. He's normal mountain biker and Colorado kid. I think at the very beginning when I started to gain traction, I kind of connected with a few of other content creators, especially when it came time for like bigger contracts. But in the very, very beginning, I certainly didn't know what to charge, but I did know that I wasn't going to do stuff just for free stuff. I think I learned that pretty quickly, that I had to ask brands like, I don't need a free bike. I have a bike. I don't need this bike, but if you want me to ride this bike, I'm happy to, do that, make content with it, and I just kind of set a rate. And if you want to know, I'll tell you the first the first bike brand that I did work with, I did get a free bike out of it. And, but I also had said, but I'll make 3 reels for $200 each, which is not a lot of money. At the beginning, I think in my head, I was just like, I hadn't charged anything. I think you start to go through this imposter syndrome of, well, I can't ask for thousands of dollars because I've never done this. And you start to get in your head about it. But I was also kind of using it as like, um, you know, a test and learn. And, certainly doing that work with that bike brand really opened a lot of other doors for me. So I kind of, I think you start to gauge, and especially since a lot of different companies out there, not everybody, I'm a specialized athlete, not everybody's a specialized sized company, so really having a sliding scale too is helpful, because something that's specialized can afford might not be the same as what like a small like local business here in Bentonville can afford. But really it comes down to, I think, making sure, like, knowing that my time is valuable and that I set that accordingly too, because I can't say yes to everything, and so that's definitely a lesson I had to learn pretty quickly too. But yeah, the pricing thing, I think it really was just sort of throw some numbers out there that I felt comfortable with. And then as I started to understand how long it would take me to make something, that was the other thing too, is there's not just one perfect number. Concepts are just that, like they're not all in the same. A concept that requires me to film at 4 or 5 different locations and is going to take a lot of editing time isn't going to be the same price as like a very quick one shot reel that might be 15 seconds long, so
Yep.
I do, and that's what I do tell brands. I say, hey, this is a starting price, but depending on the concept, because that's, I do price by concept. That's, I think it's funny because I've inherited that from my design background of, this is the project rate. But it might incur some other costs down the line if there's a lot of revisions or things like that. And so it was helpful to have that background to know, no, my time is valuable. You give clients the ability to have a certain amount of revisions, but then anything beyond that, just to make sure you've covered yourself with scope creep, which happens,
Yeah.
and things like that. So that was helpful to have that background, I think, for myself to go
Yeah.
go into content creation with that same sort of format.
Spoken like a true designer. Scope
Yeah.
creep. I feel like, wow,
Scope creep.
amazing.
Hmm.
That's interesting though.
Hmm.
Just having the project fee. I mean, I'd love to
Yeah.
dig into a little bit more of
Yeah.
like the long term versus the project based stuff.
Yes.
But that's such an interesting thing of thinking about the actual, like, yeah, how long is this going to take me? What's going to be
Right.
required? How is this going to come together? And, yeah, and can I come out slightly ahead on this whole thing? I've made
Right.
that exact mistake where I was like, every video costs this much, and then you realize, oh, this video
Yeah.
took me 2 whole days to make, where
You're right.
I
Right.
lost a lot of money. That would have
Hmm.
been a couple hours of consulting time versus 2 days of
Yeah.
filming and editing.
Hmm.
Oh, that's
Yep.
incredible. That's
Yeah.
incredible. So
Yeah.
it really started out just following up with people that were reaching out to you. How did you
Yes.
then transition from responding to the inbound traffic to then switching to more, pitch based?
Outbound.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do feel super lucky in that I haven't had to do a whole lot of outbound. I get a lot of people reaching out to us through like our contact form or through DMs. But a Specialized is a good example. I approached Specialized. And I did the whole, try to find a contact, like, okay, that contact doesn't work there anymore. So I got another contact. And I was certainly nervous to pitch, but I also, I just, if it was something that could work out, I was willing to, make something. I don't know. I was excited to just try. And I think putting yourself out there, it's different when someone's coming to you because they already see the value in you. You know, they see the value because they're reaching out to you and they want to work with you. But then to reverse and be like, hi, like it's kind of one of those things where it's good to get some no's in order to, like to hear no is good. And you just keep trying, you keep asking. It's like that typical business exercise where you go and you ask for like a discount, it's
Oh
like
yeah.
go as soon as you check out, be like, hey, could I get a 10% discount? And the worst thing they say is no. And you just pay the full price, but then best case you get a 10%, discount. And
I
so yeah,
That's such
what
a
are you gonna
great
say here?
exercise. Oh, I was just gonna say
Oh
that's such
yeah.
a great exercise to do. I think
hmm
was it a Tim Ferriss one where you go get
I think
coffee and
it's
you try to ask him for a discount?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
And I think it's just that was the mindset I had to put myself in when I was approaching brands. And yeah, so when it comes to that kind of switch and going from, I think going in with a solid ask, like know what you want, and also show your value, because they might not be familiar, right? Like we talked about before, how if these brands are reaching out to you, likely they've already seen your content, they know. I was very lucky in that the contact I did eventually talk to at Specialized already knew my content, already knew me. So that made it a whole lot easier, than in just those discussions. And I think just the timing, they were like, well, now's not a good time. Like they have certain times of the year where budget is being discussed. So they just essentially, were able to send me some product and with no strings attached, just sort of, hey, do what you want, which sometimes that's also good. Like almost like you need to kind of, it's this like, hey, show us a little bit of what you can do, like a proving grounds of sorts,
mhm,
and kind of go from there. But I think the good thing about all of that was like, I was able to make the content I wanted to make with the bike, and do what I wanted. So that was nice. But yeah, knowing what you want, like what you, and really thinking about what a long-term commitment is going to look like and what those deliverables are going to look like. Because I'm lucky in that Specialized, like I don't really pitch concepts to them. They just let me do the content that I want just on riding their bikes, which is
yeah,
very nice. And there might be some fun one-off projects that I get to do, but for the most part, it is nice to have that kind of relationship. But every brand is different
mhm. It
of what
seems
they want. Yeah.
It seems interesting too that, I'm in a similar phase right now where I'm really trying to put together my plan for next year.
hmm
And it would be so easy to just blast everybody with different proposals. But I think that more targeted approach of like, I really want to work with this brand and this is what I see it being
hmm
looking like. And so that you don't completely overcommit yourself. And then all of a sudden you're just on this treadmill knocking out deliverables for
hmm
365 days, like giving yourself that
Yeah,
space and
absolutely.
prospecting what the next project is going to be or what the next partner is going to be. We were talking
hmm
to Eric Lagerstrom from That Triathlon Life a
hmm
couple weeks ago, and he was saying
Oh, nice.
the
Yeah.
best way to build partnership and to build that portfolio is to try to find one partner per year that is like 1,000% on board and will ride for you no matter what. And if you
Yes.
could do one a
Yes.
year that's like a really good deal after a really good deal, then
hmm
after a while, like you're stable and solid and you're surrounded by people that are
hmm
completely locked in for the ride versus
Yep.
those like one hit wonder kind of partnerships that
Exactly.
probably take a lot more work. They might not know
Mhm.
everything that you're working on, and they have a specific idea of what they want you to do versus the
Mhm.
brands, like in your case, specialized. It's like, Jess,
Yeah.
you're great. Just go do what you do,
Yes.
and we'll find ways to, leverage
Mhm.
that. But ultimately, like, we are already aligned here,
Right.
and we just want you to be present here.
Yeah. Autonomy is huge. Just yeah, that the autonomy to do and create. And I think that was one of the biggest things I saw when it came to working with Specialized. They were like, we like what you do. Keep doing what you're doing. We're here to support you. And so for that, it's that's a sign of a good, partnership. And it's funny that you mentioned the whole one-off thing because we are trying to move more in the direction of these longer term partnerships. Really, also because I see some of these one-off projects that I'll do, and most times they don't perform as well. They're like, these collabs, and you have to put like the paid partnership on there and all the things, and it's just a like a one hit wonder essentially. And, whereas I'd rather grow with a brand and, a lot of what we do as content creators, there's a lot of brand awareness, right? Top of the funnel stuff. And so I do think that like when you have a longer term, when you have a partner that's in for the long haul, the brand awareness is just it just comes with people who end up following you. They're like, oh, Jess, she rides Specialized, like you see it in every video. It's just like that. It's not really the selling, right? You're just, I don't know, do you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
feels less forced as
Yeah.
well. So
There was
yeah, we
a
are trying to go that direction.
one of our listeners on Second Nature just posted a story on Substack, and Matt Trappy was talking about how emotional storytelling over a
Mm,
3 year period of time is like substantially better than sort of the product based, like 1 year, 2 year
absolutely.
type thing. And I think about that
Hmm.
a lot about what you're talking about, where
Hmm.
these, one off deals or so are like really short term, and they have a specific goal in mind, but it might not actually be as effective as if somebody did 3 years of consistent content, because the funny
Yeah.
relatable stuff is an emotion just as much as anything else. Like, a lot of the
Hmm.
trail running stuff is more like uh you know deep struggle and success type stuff,
Oh
but they're
yeah.
all emotions and they all affect us in
Right.
similar ways, right? And I think that
Hmm.
that long term impact, I'll send you the link and I'll put it in the show notes for everyone else
Yeah.
too. But I think that that long term relationship actually does pay off over time when you're just
Hmm.
associated with the brand. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. A
Hmm.
lot of brands are switching to this kind of quantitative mindset because we have so much data to work with as content creators. I can tell
Right.
you how many views my reel got, or what the
Right.
engagement rate was, or how many followers or subscribers I've got. But ultimately, like, that's not
Yeah.
really the thing that matters. It's the long-term consistency and
Hmm.
the length of the partnership that actually sort of matters in the end if I'm
Yeah.
identified with a brand, and
Right.
likewise for you.
Hmm. Yeah, and
So
it's hard to quantify that, like what that's worth, right? Like, and I'm sure there are probably studies behind, like if I were to change bike brands every year, like what does that say? And
yeah,
so yeah, I think to your point, it's these longer term relationships, and that's why it's so good in the beginning to really, don't just chase after, the I guess don't just chase after this amount, if it's like I really want this much to sustain myself, really looking at the deliverables. What are the expectations? I really think it's good to also set expectations for ourselves of, hey, let's meet every quarter so we can go over, like there's no surprises, it's just,
yeah.
hey, every quarter let's review what's been going on, what I've been working on, what product launches do you guys have coming up? Like it's, have more of that conversation more frequently throughout the year because like any client, they want to know that they're being taken care of, and
Yeah.
and likewise, like I want to make sure that, I'm fulfilling what I need to do, but that they're also giving me what I need as well. So it's a relationship.
It's interesting to see sort of the
Yeah.
development and iteration of everything too, because I think that like earlier in your process, right? You were having these sort
Hmm.
of one-off deals, and part of that was probably for you as well to sort of iterate on, how do
Hmm.
I build the relationships with these brands? How do I come up with the most successful list of, this is how much it costs, this is what I'm going to deliver, this is how much time it actually takes me. You want to
Hmm.
get that stuff sort of worked out before you
Yeah.
enter into a long-term thing, because you could enter into a long-term deal with like an insane list of deliverables or expectations and not know if you could deliver on it or not. I feel like it's important
Yeah.
kind of from the jump to start with more short-term ones, just to like make sure that you
Yeah.
feel confident in what you can deliver, right?
Yeah, and to get to know your own process, because I do feel that my process is, I mean, it's always changing. I'm always iterating on how, like each project teaches me something new, where it's like, okay, I probably could have avoided this if I had mentioned this at the beginning, or, and it's just this constant, yeah, iteration of the process. And then I think, like you said, a lot of those were just little stepping stones to really make me feel very comfortable with putting together something that's more comprehensive for a long-term proposal. So,
Mhm. One of the questions I get all the time is,
mhm.
and we talk a lot about athlete sponsorships and partnerships and pitching and stuff, and getting the relationships built up to even be able to make the pitch seems to be the one thing that
Mm.
most people struggle the hardest to do, other
Yeah.
than LinkedIn stalking. what,
Yeah.
what is, do you have any
Mm.
best practices for how you've sort of opened doors to brands to get that discussion going when it comes to outbound?
I was just about to, I was laughing to myself because I was like, being an internet sleuth or having friends that are really good at being internet sleuths. It's very helpful. That's a good question. You know, weirdly, the good old networking thing is I've met a lot of really cool people going to certain cycling specific events. And I met Elliot Jackson, um, amazing human. And we met at the Shift conference that happens here in Bentonville, or happened here in Bentonville last fall. And I weirdly, because I'm in Bentonville, I think some of the local organizers had said, "Hey, Jess, like, we'd love to offer you a ticket to go to this event." And I was like, okay. And I noticed that the speaking topics, I was like, oh, okay, it's a little bit not necessarily geared towards mountain biking, but I think there's a lot, like I wanted to go, right? And if I had not gone, I wouldn't have met, Gas, he's the CEO of Crank Brothers, and Elliot Jackson. I met them both at that event. And then it's funny because fast forward in the last year, Elliot invited me to be on a panel at the Aspire event during Crankworks. And Gas, we just did an interview. I interviewed him for our YouTube. I don't know if you saw, I did a Between Two Berms with Rich Drew
Yep.
a while back, and I did another. I just filmed another one with Gas during Crankworks, where and we had luckily had some time over the last year to get to know each other a little bit too. And my husband and I went to Laguna. We did a group ride with him and some of the other folks at Crank Brothers. So it was cool, like that. So saying yes to that event meant that I met some other people in the industry that I didn't have any intention or knew that they were going to be there. It just happened that I got to meet them, and then that opened up a lot of doors. So I think, just like I said, you have to put yourself in luck's way a little bit. Like you can't just wait for it to come to you. I think, and I think it's good to think about some of those opportunities or look at things like, okay, I think when you think of networking, you're kind of like, I know some people, it's just like, ugh, I don't want to I don't want to network. Like, I think the idea of networking is very exhausting for a lot of people. And but I went in with the intention of just going and learning and being open to whatever was going to happen. And I just happened to be literally, we were eating hors d'oeuvres. Like we weren't even, wasn't even really networking. I just happened to be sitting there, and Annika Beerton, who is, phenomenal athlete, and she coaches now here in Bentonville, lives here. She made the introduction because they were all like kind of sitting nearby. And so, yeah, I think be in the room,
Yeah.
Be in the
It
room for sure.
isn't it so funny that, like, you and I are both kind of digital presence
Mhm.
people, but
Mhm.
also the bulk of the connections that we've made has all been in person and not through, Instagram DMs or whatever else. It's always
Mhm.
seems to be that the most meaningful connections, which feels obvious now
Yeah.
that I say it out loud, but
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
the in-person stuff is what really actually matters, being at events or trade shows
Yeah.
or industry this or that. It makes
Totally.
such a difference in the depth of conversation that you could start with somebody, and then, of course, you
Mhm.
can carry it on, in meetings or offline or whatever, but, yeah, it really makes a big difference to actually be there and meet people in person.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think is just like you started doing these one-off deals to kind of get the ball rolling, and then obviously it's turned into
Mhm.
more longer term deals. But when it comes to the growth of your business and your content
Mhm.
and everything else that you're working on, what are the considerations that you have? What are you thinking about now that you've kind of
Mhm.
conquered, you know,
Huh.
Instagram now? You're into the six
Oh.
figures, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question. Like I said, we're always thinking about the like, okay, diversification. Instagram isn't the greatest platform in terms of incentivizing creators. I think you know that.
Hmm.
And so we do have this goal to put more long form content on YouTube and start to really focus on YouTube and grow TikTok as well. Just like I put a lot of apples. That would be one of my biggest recommendations or things I would say to anybody who's out there that wants to grow on social. It's if spend the extra bit of time just to upload to multiple platforms, because had I done that from the start, I mean, I think my TikTok and YouTube would be in a different place. I put a lot of eggs in the Instagram basket. And so if Instagram disappears tomorrow, I'm like, uh-oh. So there's that. And so that's kind of where I'm starting to I'm looking at Instagram and saying, okay, this is great. I want to start to kind of wean off of the one-off projects, Instagram collabs. I'll probably still take a few here and there in 2025. But really, our focus for 2025 is going to be to grow more of that long form, and kind of post more than just Instagram, right? And also, I think I alluded to perhaps an app.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
exclusives.
yeah, I literally was just talking to Tony today about it, and so we're in the sort of planning stages, but I think it's going to be pretty cool.
That's
Yeah.
cool. That's really
Hmm.
cool.
Hmm.
I want to know how this kind of lands with you because, you've
Yeah.
really made a lot of progress specifically on Instagram, and I started actually the complete opposite way. I started doing
Mm,
YouTube
me too.
tutorial videos, and then I actually in December of last year started really going into Instagram and posting like
Yeah.
one-off little tips and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
saw, yeah, some great growth there. But what I realized is that actually my phone didn't start ringing until I got into Instagram. And what I
Yeah.
think is
Huh.
that Instagram is more socially acceptable in a business setting for people to
Mm.
watch, where if they're watching YouTube videos at work, it's actually looks like they're wasting time.
Right, because they're watching like a long video. I just
Right.
never thought of it like that.
And so,
Huh.
like, because I was at, I had a decent YouTube following a couple
Yeah.
sea otters ago already, and could barely get the time of day from anybody. But the second my
Mm.
Instagram crossed over like 50,000, it was just like boom. I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, time out. I've been doing this on a way bigger level on a
Yeah.
different platform, but I feel like
Interesting.
the
Yeah.
people in the bike industry at least are actually paying attention to Instagram and maybe not
Yeah.
as much on YouTube. I don't know.
Hmm.
But I also think that now that you have established, like once
Right.
you get established, then you can go anywhere, right? And
Right.
I
Hmm.
100% agree with you. Like, absolutely go on all the platforms and kind of
Hmm.
spread your risk out over
Yeah.
a handful of these different things.
Yep.
Uh, I think actually that if I look at all of the platforms that I'm on right now, actually Substack is the one I'm the most excited about.
That's
I've
cool.
been
Yeah.
I've been doing a newsletter every week for the last year or so, and it's
Oh,
obviously the smallest of my audiences across anything, but the
yeah.
engagement is like crazy high, and
That's awesome.
it actually takes the least amount of time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I've been thinking of Substack a little bit, but I think too, as for you, being somebody who also is a teacher and a coach, I think that's like a really, yeah, that's a platform that I think can really kind of help you in
Yeah.
big ways. Yeah.
The Substack thing, I think you have to have sort of the idea in a sentence, and it could be anything really, because
Right.
the newsletter that I send out, while it does
hmm
have a section for tutorial content, the idea in a sentence is that I
hmm
send you start every Monday with the best bike videos of the week. And so it's
Yeah.
actually a curated list of my favorite mountain bike videos from the internet from the past week.
Yeah.
And then there's like an Instagram clip where I'm like, did you see this? And then it goes into
Yeah.
newsworthy, then there's like a little editorial section, and then below that, then you get to like the
Nice.
tutorial, and then an affiliate thing below that, because
Oh,
got to keep the lights on. But
now my new goal is to make it onto your newsletter for your Monday. Did
I'm
you
pretty
see
sure
this
I,
ridiculous video Jess the Maker made?
I can almost guarantee you've been on there at least once, so you're good.
Oh, oh,
Uh,
that's
but yeah,
awesome. That's
it's
cool.
it, but it's like the idea in a sentence, so it doesn't just have to
Yeah.
be only the thing that you do. It just has to be, here is what I'm going to offer you on
Right.
a regular basis that fits sort of with
Yeah.
my brand, but also, again, it goes back to that idea of authenticity and like who you are. And like, I just love bike videos, and I want to share
Yeah.
my favorite bike videos with everyone else because I can't shut up about bikes.
Right.
And I
That's
don't know.
awesome. Yeah, I
That's
love
just
that. Okay. Idea in a sentence. Mine would
that's
probably be like trail thoughts. Like almost
yeah.
like, do you remember the deep thoughts with Jack
Yes.
Candy from
Yeah.
SNL?
That
Yeah.
that would
Trail
smash
thoughts.
on Substack because there's like a notes option that goes out like
Oh,
wider. There's a whole
uh-huh.
algorithm that actually like takes your content and pushes it out. So
Huh.
you have a lot of stuff to play with at Substack. I'm happy
All
to
right.
do a little session. But
We might
yeah,
have
I
to.
think, I mean, everything that I ever did at Red Bull specifically, when we were doing business planning,
hmm
every single project started with idea in a sentence. And it was like a one
Hmm.
slide, one sheet, one sentence with a picture. And it was just like, we're going to jump out of space and survive, or whatever.
We're gonna
Um,
jump out. Yeah. Yeah. No,
but
that's like, that's awesome. I'm writing this down.
if you can get an
Yeah.
idea down to a sentence, it's something that someone else could tell somebody, and then they could tell another person, and they could tell another person. And there's some
Right.
element of, I guess, virality built into that, right?
Right.
Um, so
I
I
love
don't know.
that.
It's
That's
it's
awesome.
it's interesting. Now,
Yeah.
I guess like I want to just wrap up talking about the athlete and content creator side of things, and then kind of switch
hmm
over into working with brands. But is there
Sure.
anything else? Like, a lot of athletes out there are still like kind of on the sidelines when it comes to making any kind of content. They're sort of paralyzed by like, I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm going to say, or it's not going to be gnarly enough for me to post, or I don't know how
Mm,
this is supposed to make money, or
right.
whatever. Is there any sort of just like advice that you've picked up over the last couple of years that maybe made the
Right.
biggest difference for you?
Yeah. I would say, well, one, I don't think there's anything wrong with posting the process, right? Like we see all these polished videos, these shredits,
Hmm.
post the process, and let people into that because then you're kind of creating a little bit of more trust and engagement with people because they get to see sort of a behind the scenes that maybe they, didn't get to see, and it's or know about you as a person. And not that you have to, I know like a lot of people really don't want to share too much about their personal lives, and you don't have to, right? I think there comes this line that you can draw of like, here are the things I can share. These are the things, but there's certainly a lot of things, I mean, I have shared a lot of things on the internet. The internet's seen me on the toilet. And so, but I will say the more you do it, it's just like mountain biking or any sport really. It's the more you do it, the easier, it's still hard, but it gets easier, right? You kind of have to make yourself comfortable with being uncomfortable. That doesn't mean there's still moments where before I post something, I'm like, do I really want to post this video of me like on the toilet? Like, do I want hundreds of thousands of people to see this? And you start to get in your head about, all the things. But if I let that feeling stop me I wouldn't be where I am now.
Hmm.
Because I remember that same feeling. So I still get that same feeling of, oh, I don't know if I want to post this. I still have those feelings with certain things. And I will say that every time I've just gone ahead and posted the thing, it's been awesome, or it's been good, and so yeah, it's that getting comfortable, and I do think consistency is a huge part of it too.
Yeah,
Um, and the more you do it, the easier it gets, and letting people into the process of, yeah, being an athlete. It's hard. It's hard being an athlete. So I
absolutely.
think sharing more of that would be awesome.
I also feel like, and maybe it's different if you were an athlete that had a decent following already, but I feel like for
Mm,
most people that are considering even starting doing content for their own stuff, the
hmm.
best and worst part is actually the same thing in that no one really cares. You know,
Yeah.
like if you're
Hmm.
starting out and you post something, probably nobody cares if it's good or
Yeah.
bad at all,
Right.
which can
Yeah.
be sort of a bummer when it doesn't get a million views. But also, like,
Mm,
yeah, you got to get those reps and you got to start somewhere. No one starts
absolutely.
off and gets like a billion views on a reel. Like, you have to start somewhere. And if the
Hmm.
best part is that no one cares because they're not going to watch it probably anyways, but it's like a meaningful first step for you, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
And even if it's awful, like no one no one really
Yeah.
cares that
No one
much
really
about it. Like
cares.
no
Yeah.
one gets that fired up about, yeah, your first attempt at making it, which is good and bad, but
Right.
it's
Yeah. It's
you
like
have to start.
you're probably not going to get massive air on the first jump you ever do. It's reps,
Yep.
getting in the reps. And, you know, I think yeah, had I not done that, gotten the reps, who knows where I'd be. But yeah.
It is really cool. What's been your best experience working with a brand specifically through this whole process? Is there sort of like a best practice,
Mm,
or I mean, you could even go back to like how you've pitched stuff and something has come together in an amazing way, but have there been any
mm-hmm.
experiences, because I think a lot of people listening to this podcast also represent brands or work at brands, and they're sort
Mm-hmm.
of looking for that, how do we be the number one on Jess's list, or how can we be the right partner for someone? What's that look like when it actually all comes together?
Mm, yeah. I think, well, one, because I have such my brand does lean into like the authentic, relatable, sort of funny, entertaining side of things. So what's nice is when people are reaching out to me, they kind of know they don't expect me to be making this like serious video about like products and stuff, although I've done that, by the way, which felt a little off brand for me, but it's just, one of the many lessons I've learned. But I think really starting with that idea, if you're a brand and you're approaching a creator, you're obviously approaching them because you like their style or they have a following that speaks, to their audience. So I think just letting the creator, giving them the autonomy to at least come with a concept, and then saying, okay, like that looks great. And I try really hard too. For me, whenever we're creating, a concept and it requires a lot of speaking, I do script it out as best as I can. And I typically tell brands that, hey, I'm probably going to stick to this close to 90 to 100%. Sometimes I might phrase things a little differently, but that way there's no surprises. And it also saves a lot of time when, like, if say you said something weird and they're like, well, we don't like that. We want you to say this. And then you have to go and refilm.
Mhm.
So planning is a huge part of it too. And so, a brand, you might work with a brand and they might say, hey, we want this reel. And you say, okay, great, here's the concept. And then you end up filming it. And they seem really like hands off, but then they might have all of these, oh, but we don't. So I think just planning, even if it feels like it's a little much, really goes a long way, and it saves you a lot of time in the end. And in terms of brands, like, that's a good thing to be looking for or asking creators is, okay, love the concept. Like, as much information as you can give. It's weird because you need that balance of autonomy, letting the creator do what they're good at and do it in the way that feels good for them, but also making sure that they have all of the tools they need or the information they need to make sure that there's nothing that was missed or worded weirdly or whatever. And a lot of bigger brands have great guidelines, to follow. And
Mhm.
that's helpful. It's like a little roadmap, but not every brand does. And so having that is good, like some sort of project guideline, brand guidelines, have you worked with any like alcohol brands? Because there's so many guidelines with alcohol brands. So that's the part. That's why I say that, because it's like, okay, you can't show the bottle in a stream. You can't, there's all these rules. And so making sure like all that's taken care of in the beginning with some sort of project brief
Yeah.
is good. Yeah.
I have not worked with any alcohol brands, but my last job before this was at a biotech company where you had to deal with regulatory, legal, and medical guidelines, which is like
Oh,
basically
wow.
impossible to do, what you
Whew.
want to do.
Right.
I remember like my first day there, they were like, yeah,
Oh,
so everything you did at Red Bull, just do the opposite and you'll be cool.
oh, wow. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be challenging, like just
Yeah.
threading the needle between all the requirements. And I was smiling when you were talking about it because I'm just thinking about the handful of times that I've had to like put the sweaty jersey back on to go like film the clip to replace the previous clip, or make sure I added in the
Hmm.
extra call to action or whatever else that I somehow managed to miss the first time around. And that
Yeah.
upfront clarity and that discussion
Yes.
makes all the difference in the world. We had a thing at
Hmm.
Aura where I would give the creator like a 12-page PowerPoint with like, hey, this is a little bit more information about the product than we typically talk about so that
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
context in detail. You don't have to say all this stuff, but like just want to like fill you in on stuff that we care about. And then here's a page of sort of like mandatory stuff that makes us really happy if you hit a handful of these points. And then
Yeah.
this is what it's actually going to be used for. Just try to give the
Right.
creator a lot more context to what they're actually creating for us, or for the
Yeah.
collaboration, so that you can, have at least like an understanding of the context of why they're paying you money to represent their
Hmm.
brand, essentially.
Yeah.
Those go a long way, I think, for getting the actual outcome that everybody actually wants.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
One of the questions that I had when it comes to structuring these deals, specifically working with brands,
Hmm.
there's a lot of different ways that brands can approach the content that you create. So you could do a paid or you could do a collaborative
Yeah.
post, say on
Hmm.
Instagram. You could do something where it's just your channel. You could do something just on their channel, or you could also do sort of the growth ad, right? Where you just
Yeah.
show up on Meta somewhere in the universe, and it's
Yeah.
you talking about their stuff. How do you think about putting that together when it comes to deliverables? Like, are you going all the way down and listing out that stuff, and or more appropriately, like, are you doing a lot of stuff that isn't showing up on your channel?
I have done stuff that doesn't show up on my channel, but for the most part, it is stuff on my own channel. Sometimes it's just stuff on my channel, and the brand, we don't necessarily collab, but it's a paid partnership and you can see, the brand. So usually that's in those initial discussions of, if the brand doesn't already send, hey, this is what we're looking for. Typically they, like larger brands, they know exactly what they want. They're like, we want one reel syndicated to TikTok. So same reel, just put it on TikTok. They want a certain amount of ad usage. That's always a question I ask too. Like, okay, like, well, what's the ad usage look like? Do you want to do 30 days, 60 days? I price those things differently, so yeah, getting all of like just like the standard, this is what we're looking for. Story sets too, just meaning like, hey, 3 to 4 stories while that post is probably live, just talking about whatever product and in a natural way. And then so typically brands will come knowing exactly what they want, but a lot of smaller brands, you kind of have to guide them, and you have to say, well, and I think a lot of them are like, oh, I never thought about that. And, for instance, sales tax. If I'm if I'm delivering a video, like, so say I'm creating a video, and in the end this video then belongs to the client. I'm delivering a digital good, right? So that's taxable. And so I have to charge Arkansas state sales tax on that. And so I explained that to them. If you want to own the rights outright, you want to own this piece of this video, this is now your video. Or if I'm the one posting it, it's a collab post, and they don't retain the rights of the video. I still retain the rights. Then I don't have to charge sales tax. It's like a whole thing. There's like a whole
Wow.
matrix. Yeah. And so, and photographers come up against this quite a bit because if they sell their images, it's a digital good, right? Um, so yeah, the whole sales tax thing is a whole thing. So it's really trying to, in the beginning, sometimes you have to be the one educating the brand. And then, but I've also learned a lot from working with brands that are a little more established and maybe have had an influencer program or a creator program for a while. And so I've kind of learned from those bigger experiences or those brands that have programs, and I'm able to kind of like educate the smaller brands like, okay, well, this is like how some brands do it. And, just kind of in some ways like the middle person between some of the things, and but also knowing exactly like the terminology. And I think sometimes it happens where I think I didn't know what like but this was maybe a year or so ago. A brand had asked me what my dark posting fees were, and I was like, what is that? And I had to Google it.
What
So
is
yeah,
that?
it's when a brand will essentially use your post as an ad, but it doesn't show up on my feed. Um, I believe that's what that is. Dark posting. And
So it'd be
white listing is another term, but
oh, okay. That one I
yeah.
know. Dark
Let me
dark posting is sort of like the growth ads that they'd be using, but you just aren't tagged in it or you're not connected to it, right? Like it's just
yeah, like
basically
it's not on.
advertising.
Right. It's like what I'm just reading, so I'm not like making a fool out of myself here. But yeah, essentially, it's it's when they're placing ads in a target audience's newsfeed without showing them on the business's profile or page. So it doesn't really show up on anybody's page. It just shows up kind of in the feed, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I I'm taking notes today.
Yeah.
I'm learning stuff. I had no
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
I wonder who that I guess it has to be an ad placement of some sort, but yeah, I've never heard that.
Yeah.
The whitelisting thing is interesting, and there's some
Yeah.
really interesting ways that even brands aren't necessarily using just yet, specific to YouTube. For
Hmm.
example, if you do a YouTube ad, you can actually connect it to or the
Oh, okay.
creator's YouTube, and that way it shows up to their audience first. So YouTube will actually filter the
Oh,
ad. So if you do a YouTube pre-roll ad for Specialized,
yeah.
for example, and
Okay.
Specialized connects you to the ad campaign, anybody
Hmm.
who's subscribed to your channel will be kind of pre-selected to see it before anybody else, which obviously
Yeah.
in terms of conversion will probably convert 10x higher than anything else. Where if you
Yeah.
just sort of sent it to a normal person that was watching it, maybe liked bikes versus like, I'm already
Right.
following Jess on YouTube and now I'm seeing an ad with her.
Yeah.
It's something that I haven't seen
Ah,
used a whole lot, but it's a
interesting.
totally possible thing. So
Yeah. Okay. Well,
we're in
we're
the
learning.
deep, yeah, we're in the
Yeah,
deep end of all this stuff.
we're-
Well, I think this is like really important though, because it's really important, I think, also for creators to kind of compare notes. And I've seen this happen
yeah.
in photography too, where there's a lot of photographers that are kind of trying to come up, but then in the process, they end up undercutting the established
Yeah.
photographers. And then
Yeah.
everybody, takes a big drop. And I think it's important that, there is sort of transparency and,
Yep.
having people like Seabass and Colorado and
Hmm.
Brendan and everybody sharing kind of like, hey, this is where we're collectively at. That way, you're not pulling the
Oh
rug out
yeah.
from anybody, and
Yeah.
I think that's the best part, at least in mountain biking. I think
Oh
this is
yeah.
everywhere in the outdoor industry, but people are pretty open and honest about what they're
Yeah.
doing so that nobody
Yeah.
gets undercut, but also like there is
Hmm.
value to our time and there is value to the work that we're
Hmm.
putting out. And even that I still feel like sometimes
Yeah.
feels like we're doing a lot of extra stuff to make sure that it works. And
Right.
I don't know about
Well,
you, but I've even said no, or I've even shut down deals because I'm like, this isn't performing as well as I want it to for you, and I don't
no.
think that the brief actually makes sense for either one of us. Let's just
Yeah.
pause it until we figure it out.
It's good. It's good to know when to say no and when something doesn't necessarily fit. Like for a long time I was kind of this belief, like if I haven't used your product or or if I don't have a good amount of time to really try the product out, that's always the first thing. If I haven't used your product, like send it to me, I'll use it. And because I'm not going to promote something that I don't love, it's going to feel like incredibly inauthentic for me. And
Yeah.
then that's like against everything I believe, right? And so, I do get a lot of like random requests for, and so those are a little easier to field. I'm just kind of like, if I haven't heard of them, if I go and I look at their Instagram or I look at their socials and I'm like, I don't know. I also don't know that I have a need for this thing, right?
Right.
So I think really, yeah, and just kind of stepping back and saying like, is this partnership one that makes sense for both parties? And it's hard to walk away, but I think it's really good because it's going to leave you space for something else that's better for you. And yeah.
Do you have any sort of when it comes to posting content, do you have sort of a ratio in mind of how often you're posting just what you want to post versus the partnered posts?
I prefer, I have an ideal number in my head of like, I really don't love posting more than one paid promotion a week. And might be weeks where I don't do any. It really just depends on the pipeline and where I'm at with certain projects, and then where the brand is at with approving certain things and when they want to post it. So sometimes recently there was a week where it was like two in a row, and I was like, oh, I don't like that. But at the same time, I was just kind of like, okay, whatever, ideally it wouldn't be more than like one a week or one every 2 weeks seems good. I really love, yeah, just making sure I do find good amount of time, and I try to prioritize the content I like that we want to make, to filter that in throughout the week, or I'll repost an old video, if I don't have anything for the week. But yeah, I think it is good to balance it out for sure. Because I am very, very aware of not wanting to make my feed feel like a bunch of ads. Like that
Yeah,
doesn't is not something I want. I don't think any of us really want that, but yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
Well, this I've taken so many notes so far. This is helpful,
Nice.
and I'm sure it's
Yeah.
helpful for everyone that's listening, both on the brand and athlete side. I mean, there's so much to take from this to get a little bit of like an inside look on how
Hmm.
this whole thing comes together, because it's sort of a mystery for athletes that are
Yeah.
getting into content creation on their own. It's also
Hmm.
somewhat of a mystery to the brands themselves. What do we ask for? How do we interact with this person? What is the best
Hmm.
way to make the connection? From the brand side, hey, feel free to just DM us. It's all good.
Yeah.
But like from
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
side,
Yeah.
meeting him in person makes a big difference and
Yeah.
gives us the depth that
Yeah.
we're probably looking for when it comes to long term stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we always kind of end the pod with a segment called
Hmm.
BPC, brand
Ah,
product
yes,
content, and I gave you a little prompt
you
beforehand.
did. Hmm.
And since you're the guest, you get to go first. Hit us with your
Okay.
BPC.
The BPC. So what does C stand for? Brand product
Content. So
content.
it's basically like anything that
Yeah.
you think is awesome on the internet this week or around, roughly around that you want to highlight.
Well, I feel like it's a couple weeks have passed, but and I don't know if anyone's mentioned this in the recent um, couple pods, but the Olympics. Has anyone like talked about the Olympics at all?
A fair bit, but all good.
Oh,
There's a lot of different angles and so many different stories to pull out of it too.
okay. So, you know, I always obviously enjoy when the internet comes alive
Yes.
with something, and the breakdance performance.
Oof.
That wasn't my initial one. I was actually going to talk about the Tom Cruise like torch pass off.
Oh,
Do
to Kate
you
Courtney.
did you see? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which
Yes.
was I was all like excited because no, like
Yeah. Yeah.
like that was pretty exciting. Like I thought that was a big moment.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know?
there was I think four sports in total featured
Yeah.
in that sequence, right? Tom Cruise
Mm-hmm.
hands the torch to Kate, she hands
Yep.
it to Michael Johnson, who hands it to Jagger Eaton, and maybe it was only three sports, I forget. But yeah,
Yeah.
for mountain biking to be one of the few. It's funny though to think that like mountain
Yeah.
biking's been an Olympic sport since 96, right?
You're looking at the wrong person, but yes. Sure.
I mean, it's actually been around.
Yeah.
It's like
It's been around a while.
there was like
Feels new,
a
but
big chunk of action sports like BMX, skate, surf got added
mhm.
into this previous one,
Mhm.
and but mountain bike has been in it for a
Yeah.
pretty long time. But it still
Mhm.
feels kind of new in a way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah.
it's been around since literally the '90s in the Olympics, it's still I don't know,
Yeah.
something about it still feels like kind of fresh and new. And the fact that of the sports they could choose, they chose that is
I know.
pretty cool.
That's why I thought it was like a really special moment. I was like, this is a big year for mountain biking, women in red, Rampage and that handoff with Tom Cruise. That got me really excited. I
Yeah.
was excited.
Big shout out to Kate Courtney, who is a
Yeah.
listener of the Second Nature pod.
Oh,
So
that's cool. Hi,
she's
Kate. That's awesome. Yeah, I thought that was rad. I was like, what's funny is I had a friend that sent me, she doesn't mountain bike. She knows I mountain bike, obviously. And she was like, hey, did you see this? And I was like, no, I did it because we weren't really watching it live. And so it was funny that, that was like something she noticed is like, hey, look, like even someone who doesn't mountain bike was like, well, look at that, mountain biking being featured. And so, yeah, I thought that
it's
was pretty
s-
exciting.
so awesome. Are you going to go to Rampage to see the women ride this year?
I would love to go, but I don't think I'll be able. This is like new information, but Tony and I are going to be moving
Oh,
from,
cool.
yes, and so I won't say where just yet. It's a surprise. It's a surprise, but out of Arkansas, I'll say that. And I think it's probably going to line up that it's going to be in October, and so it was just kind of a rough, like I couldn't commit to it. But will
Yeah.
you be at Rampage?
I think I'm gonna be overseas during that week too, so I'm missing
Oh,
out. I've had a hand in, the early days of formation and
yeah,
everything. So,
that's
I
awesome.
signed Hannah Bergman to Red Bull too. So,
I
really,
was, yeah.
yeah, super bummed
Uh,
about her
I'm
injury.
super bummed about her injury, although I am st like Chelsea.
Mhm.
What I met her a long, long time ago at Bootleg Canyon. Her and Ryan Rodriguez were riding there, and they were so nice to it. Can I just say, like, they're super high level athletes, right? And this is years ago. I was just like riding around Bootleg Canyon, and probably on a blue trail or something. And they were like, "Hey, you want to ride with us?" Super nice, like
That's awesome.
super welcoming. Hey, you want to ride with us? And I was like, they were in full faces and stuff, and I just looked at them and I think I was like, I think I'm good. And they pointed up. They like pointed at this cliff, and I had said, I don't know what it is about me that makes you think like I look like I could do that, but thank you. I'm gonna pass.
That's
Very nice.
awesome.
But yeah, yeah, I'm stoked that Chelsea. I know Chelsea's pretty torn up that Hannah can't. Everyone's torn up that Hannah's out, but
Yeah.
you know,
There will be
oof,
more opportunities. And honestly, I mean, part of the reason why we brought her in the first place was because we knew that she'd be able to do this. And
yeah,
but even that said, she's done so much since she got that first Red Bull
oh yeah,
helmet. And I was
hmm
there obviously when they presented her helmet. And
oh,
Michelle Parker, who's this like ripping backcountry
yeah,
skier, she and Jill Kittner presented the helmet.
oh
And
yeah.
Michelle Parker said to her in the moment when she was handing her the helmet, said, "This isn't pressure, this is validation."
Oh,
And it was
that's
such a
awesome.
cool moment to see this,
That is
like,
cool.
she's done so much since she got that helmet, and she'll do so much more, Rampage or not. And I think
Absolutely.
that's like what makes me feel good about,
Yeah.
where she's at. I obviously wanted to see her have that moment.
Yeah.
But I'm just excited that Rampage is including the women, and I know that it's going to be incredible and like such an important jump off point for like all of mountain biking for this to happen. So
Yes,
I'm
it
really
is.
fired up. Sort of exclusive, but next week Katie Holden's on the pod, so we're gonna talk to her.
Oh,
We're going
yeah,
deep
that's awesome.
on Rampage.
Going deep. Katie's an amazing human. Such an
Okay,
amazing
so
human.
my BPC is
Okay.
actually about Rebecca Rush. She just
Oh.
released a series called Brainstorm. For those who don't know, Rebecca Rush is one of the greatest endurance athletes of all time, mountain bike legend, and she
Mm-hmm.
had a concussion a couple years back, and what I think is really interesting from like the content nerd in me is that you can
Yeah.
be an athlete and not have to commit to like, I'm going to do a podcast twice a week forever until the end of
Right.
time. You can just do a series. You can just kind of
Right.
offer up little bits of value here and there. And this series about
Hmm.
her concussion, and they go deep into speaking to experts from the medical side of thing and
Um,
from all these different angles to give
yeah.
context to it, because I feel like concussion isn't really talked about. It's just like a, oh
Hmm.
shucks, well, you'll get better. But they
Hmm.
really go deep into trying to educate people about concussion protocol and what
Yeah.
happens and all that stuff. So it's called Brainstorm. It's like the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
And it's Rebecca and I think Celine Yeager is the host of it, and it's
Nice.
interviews with all kinds of people trying to like shed some light on concussion. So that just released the last
That
couple
just
weeks.
released. That's
Yeah,
awesome. I
definitely
did not
something
know
for
that.
everyone to check
And
out. So
yeah, Rebecca's super awesome. I met her in person for the first time at Sea Otter a couple of years ago, and we played cornhole. Um, it was great.
she's
She was even great
amazing.
at corn. She was even great at cornhole. So,
She's good at
I
everything.
mean,
She just
she literally is good at everything,
yeah.
and such a phenomenal. Like she's has been a big cheerleader of my content over the last year, a couple years, and has sent me messages, and it's meant a lot. So it's cool that someone who is such a high level athlete can appreciate something that, I know it for me, it's like, well, I'm not doing the crazy athletes. Like I don't rely on being a good athlete to do what I do.
Mhm.
And so there is sometimes that little bit of like imposter syndrome of, like I'm a good rider. I'm not the best rider. I'm not but just to have that validation from a person like Rebecca Rush to be like, you're doing something awesome, like keep it up. I was just like, oh my God, like, thanks, Rebecca.
Hon I mean,
It's cool.
honestly
Yeah.
honestly, Jess, I feel like what you're doing is helping a lot of people get into the sport and get excited about mountain biking. So all the
Yes.
respect, like you're
Oh,
absolutely
thanks.
crushing it. And thanks so much
Yeah.
for joining on the pod today. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are probably have a full page of notes just like me.
Oh, thanks. Oh, well, thank you for having me and doing this podcast. And I hope, um, yeah, I hope people got something out of it today. And, you can find me on Instagram, DM me if you have questions, and happy to answer anything. I think, like you said earlier, knowledge sharing is super important. And I have definitely had, we don't have coworkers, and you don't want to work in a silo,
Yeah,
especially as somebody working as a content creator where you're probably working from home and don't have coworkers necessarily. So kind of utilizing the internet in that way of just connection and being able to share in those experiences and knowledge is important. So
100%.